So what we've got here is a freshly painted car with base coat and clear coat. And before I start putting the car back together and the rubber trim and the windows and everything, I want to go ahead and do a wet sand and buff / polish. So I went and picked up some sandpaper. This is just a little kit with some really high grit sandpapers. I'm going to start with 2000. Most people kind of start with 1500, but I'm just going to go with 2000. Start with the highest you can, and if it takes too long, then maybe drop down, but just better to start with a higher grit. And if you need to drop down, do it, but if not, stick with a higher one. And then I picked up a 3000, so I'm going to plan to do 2000, 2500, then 3000. Might drop down to 1500, but probably not. The orange peel is not that bad, and there's a little bit of dirt and debris, but my goal is to not remove all of the imperfections in the paint. I'm just trying to give it a bit extra shine, remove some orange peel, and just make it look a little better. So not trying to make it look perfect. Probably not necessary, but I did let the car sit out in the sun a couple days, which may have kind of cooked some dirt or debris into the paint. So I did go over it with a clay bar cloth here. If you haven't seen these kind of clay bar rags, they're nice. And I've got some soapy water, some car soap with water in there. That'll be what I use to kind of wet down the surface. And then I also have a soft, flexible sanding block, so I'm not using my fingers to sand down the car. And I'm only going to do like the flat surfaces, so tops of the fender, maybe just a little bit on the side, and right here, staying away from the body line. Maybe do the top of the door and the bottom side of the door, but I'm not going to get down to the bottom of the door, or at least like the very bottom of the door or the rocker panel. And then here, you know, just doing the big areas, the hood and the roof, I'll do those. But as far as like this little section on the hatch, probably not going to do that. A-pillars, probably not doing that. Headlight buckets, again, it's just too small of an area, and I don't have all that many tools, and these pads are kind of too big for that, and I'm not worried about it. So I just want to hit the big areas, and over the next couple days we'll get this car knocked out. So for those of you who've done this before, you know what I'm kind of looking at here. This is right after sanding 2000, and I've wiped the water off. You can see how it's dull at the top, but getting in closer, you can see all of the highs and lows of the orange peel, and then you can see a little specks of where some debris has landed. But if you look overall at the panel, this was just, I don't know, 2 minutes of sanding with 2000. So all of this is already very flat. So I don't have, you know, thankfully, and you know, maybe the clear I used contributed to that, I don't have much orange peel, because that was 2000 for maybe a minute, 2 minutes, and it's already, you know, smooth compared to in here where there's just a little bit of orange peel. So, you know, at least that's pretty good news to me, or for me, that 2000 is all I have to really do to this car. You know, 2000, 2500, and 3000, but I don't have to go down to 1500. And yeah, so I just wanted to give you that update. But for those of you who haven't done this before, you know, this is what the orange peel kind of looks like, and you're just wanting it to look more like this, where it's all dull color versus all of these little bumps, it looks like. So probably just spend a little bit extra time on a spot like that, but otherwise that was not too bad. got an update for y'all here. I have completed this fender, and it's a couple days later, and just want to talk through a lot of things that I've learned so far throughout this process. One of them being that this random orbital buffering wheel is much slower cutting than a standard buffer that doesn't have that random action. So this cuts very, very slow, and also these pads are the slower cutting pads versus a wool pad. So those two combined make for a very slow cutting process. And this V36 was just taking way too long to get the 2000 grit sanding scratches out. I was making pass after pass and they weren't coming out. I was getting kind of frustrated, didn't know what I was doing wrong, but I've learned that these two combined are just very slow in the cutting process. So I went out to Harbor Freight and picked up some McGuire's extra heavy cut compound, and I picked up some ultra finishing polish. So I used this first and then this to follow up. I used the orange pad with the extra heavy cut and then the white pad with the finishing polish. And even then it still does take several passes, but it's not taking too long to go ahead and switch up the system. So I'd rather have it take off too little material and I spend more time versus it's taking off way too much material and I risk burning through the clear. So that's something I've learned, and I'm just working through it. But the panel is coming out pretty good. I will see if I can get a demonstration here. So the fender is done and the door is not. So if we can just get a reflection, you might not be able to tell, but I've got a light here and I will try and demonstrate a light reflection. So hopefully you can see that the fender is a much clearer picture. And so that's how it's coming so far. Getting that extra clarity out of the paint, but it is definitely a lot of work. I could think of several things I would rather be doing than this. But you know, it's part of the process. It is making it look better, and you know, I'm just doing the big sections, and those will be done soon enough, and it'll just make the paint 10 times better. So I'll see you in the next update. Now in my last video, I did mention I had a run right here, and it was a pretty tall or pretty big run. It wasn't just like a little sag. It was, as you can see, a pretty big run. And I did use the razor blade method. I sanded down the edges so that if I got off a little bit, the edges weren't digging into the paint. And I just got to the high part of the run, and I just started scraping it lightly. I will say that one of the tips is to get this to go faster, keep your blade basically as vertical as you can, and that is going to be the best way to really sand down the run. If you have it like on the side, you're really not going to do much. You can see it's not much white powder's coming off, but if you keep it vertical, and I still have some more work to do up here, so I'll do this for example. Keep it vertical. You can see all that white powder is the clear coat coming off. So this is pretty much good now. You really can't feel it anymore, and it is definitely in a situation where I can use some sandpaper. 2000 1500 to 2000 to 3000 and go over this, and you won't be able to see it. So you can see how much dust I've gotten off. And yeah, worked really good taking out that run. So I didn't really film an outro for this color sanding video, so this is a couple months later, and I want to go ahead and do that now and talk about the things that I learned. Overall, I'm glad I did it, although it was a very, how would you say, not fun process, and I hated it while I was doing it. Seeing the end product is just so much better than what it was. I didn't think there was that much orange peel, but seeing the vast difference between the panels that I did and didn't is pretty drastic. And so yeah, overall, I'm happy with the way it turned out. I will show you how the run turned out, since that was one of the last clips I filmed. You can still see the light deform just a little bit there, but otherwise you really can't notice. It's gone basically. And then I want to cover some of the things that might be able to pass on to you, some of the tips. These were the 3 pads that I used the most. The orange medium cut, this kind of like microfiber-ish pad. This is the one that is really going to do the most cutting. This combined with the ultra cut is going to really remove the scratches, so you want to be very diligent of that. You'll probably you don't want to use this very long, but those are things that you'll learn as you use it. Not very long the first time you do, maybe one or 2 passes, and then maybe that took the scratches out, maybe it didn't, maybe you go longer, and then if it took the scratches out, you can go ahead and move on to the next one and the next one. So that's kind of the process. I did stick with these 2 compounds. They were pretty expensive at Harbor Freight, but they did last the entire car. And I felt like I was using quite a bit, but they just seem to never run out. They're kind of like bottomless. So those lasted. And then finally, I did pick up another polisher machine here. This one is non-random, so it just spins one direction, and it's got the finger trigger on here, and it's just going to spin. So what this one is good at is doing curves and areas that aren't flat. So for example, in here, on this curve here, and then any kind of body line curves, or even like this door, anything that's curved, the random orbital sander is not gonna really want to play. So if this thing isn't spinning, it's not cutting. And when you're not on a flat surface, it ends up just vibrating. So you'll want to pick up one of these to do those types of areas, and that'll help you get them done. That's really all I got for a recap. I hope you guys learned something. Enjoy the way the car turned out, and that's gonna wrap it up for this video. See y'all.